What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about a Resident Evil 5 remake. That's right, 4's remake is out, so as always, I jump the gun and I start talking about the next thing. I mean, in all honesty, I'm going to be covering 4's remake on the channel a ton, but I do just want to talk about this one time, and I think it's a fascinating, at least myself personally, it's a fascinating topic, because this really is that divide. This is kind of the moment I think fans are like observers, right? You see what Resident Evil's been doing, you see what Capcom's been doing, and you say, okay, eventually they're going to reach this moment, this literal moment, where they are going to have to decide to do something potentially risky or potentially something that you wouldn't expect them to do. And what I mean by that is the path so far was kind of obvious. You started at 2, and then you just kept going, like literally in order, 2, 3, 4. And then eventually you were going to get to 5. So you could look back at probably at 3, right? Because you could maybe look at Resident Evil 2's remake being a one-time thing. But as soon as you do 3's remake, you say, okay, they're eventually going to run into a potential problem. Because once you get to 5, you reach this polarizing game. Now, I'll tell you really quickly, my opinion on 5, I actually really liked it. This was the first Resident Evil game I super jumped into. I had played 4 a little bit. I jumped into 5. I actually went back to 4. But 5 was the first one. I actually played this with a very close friend of mine, and we enjoyed the heck out of it, okay? Now, maybe time has not been kind to it. I don't actually know. I played this game back a decade plus ago, so I'm not willing to say that the game still holds up, and that's a subjective thing anyway, right? Because a lot of people didn't like this game, but a lot of people did. But another issue is this game just was pretty different. I mean, 4, I think, took the franchise in a different direction than what 2 and 3 at the time did, but 5 really started to go all the way, right? Now you got co-op, a big co-op kind of experience, and also way more actiony than any you thought 4 was actiony at the time. Well, wait until you saw 5. Now, I have seen other articles kind of floating around the same idea that this is the tough decision time, because do you reboot it? Do you do like a Code Veronica? Code Veronica is more in line with the more modern Resident Evil experience. And when I say modern, I don't mean like Resident Evil 5 and 6 modern. I mean literally this new age that we're in from 7, and then you had the remakes and you had 8. I think the group of people that 7 was their first game, or they played Resident Evil 2 for the first time in the remake, right? Or they played 4 for the first time in the remake. I think all of their interests align more in Code Veronica than it does 5. Does that make sense? I think that's a pretty fair statement to make. But again, you got to go back to the order. 5 would be next up. And let's also not forget the age. So one thing that people may throw out there, I think it's kind of fair, well, how old, right? How long has it been since Resident Evil 5? Well, Resident Evil 5 came out in March of 2009. So this game is 14 years old. So there's always a debate of how long a game has to exist before it gets remade. And I'm actually pretty picky with it as well. I don't want a game getting remade after 3, 4, 5 years. I think that's ridiculous. I think you need to have about a decade or so being out there. Well, what's crazy is it's already been 14 years, right? So if you were to do a 5 remake, you're looking at 2, 3 years down the line, probably 3, right? So you'd be looking at closer to 20 years that this game has been out. And you'd also imagine the co-op thing could actually really help this game, right? So you'd have to program it modern day. You'd have to bring it up to a quote-unquote modern audience. But what I mean by that simply is you just make the AI smarter, right? Make her hold her own more in this game. And then the co-op, where you can now you make the decision, can you do couch co-op? You have to decide that. I know I did that when it originally came out. And then online co-op, playing with people online. I think that would work. And then a controversial opinion of mine, I really do think the game would work. I think if you did a RE5 game right now and you remade it, I feel like you'd get a lot, well, firstly, I think you get a lot more love on this game now than you did back in 2009. You'd probably have the people that say, well, I was too harsh on it, or, whatever. You'd have new-time fans. I guess what you'd really be doing, though, is kind of just repeating what 5 originally did. You'd actually be entirely redoing that, because it's the same kind of thing. Back then, you had all the games leading up into 5, and then 5 was that turning point of the series. Now you look at it, and again, we've had these more horror. They've gone back to their roots. And I guess that's what 5's, like, that's the ultimate issue with 5, right? Is back then, it kind of bucked the trend where it changed things. And now, because they've gone back to their roots of horror, and we've had a boatload of games, both original games and remake games, this would then do the exact same thing. It would still be, hey, remember when there was this game that polarized broke apart the community? Let's do it again and let's remake it. And one final thing I want to throw out there, if you guys remember, years ago, there was the leak, the Capcom, I think they got hacked, right? It was a bad event, and it wasn't something you would necessarily want to repeat, but we got a long, long list of all of the future Resident Evil games. And if I remember right, and you guys can totally correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like it stopped around this time. In that leak, I know for sure we knew that there would be a Resident Evil 4 remake. I also think Resident Evil 9 was kind of confirmed. I think it's a different name, but it's like it is the equivalent of Resident Evil 9. And this was maybe 2.5 to 3 years ago. So I guess why I bring this up, really where we're at with these games, it's been easy to predict them. You could predict all of the, I mean, you could probably pretend like you never saw the leaks, lie to people, and say, oh, I didn't see anything, but I'll tell you the next 4 years of Resident Evil games. You probably could have done that, right? But we're at the end of it. Now, we still need Resident Evil 9 to finish that trilogy, but after that, we don't really know. Nobody's hacked them, so which is a good thing, but we don't know the future. So I don't think you can say for sure if 5 would get remade or not, right? There's no kind of cheat code. If you made a video, which I did, I made a video talking about will there be a Resident Evil 4 remake. In that video, I mentioned the leak because, like, yeah, there is going to be one because they got hacked and we know that, right? You can't do that now. There's no backing. You don't have any extra info to say whether they're going to do it or not. So me personally, I kind of think they'll do it. I don't know if it would necessarily work. I would want it to work. To be honest with you, I kind of would want to replay 5. It holds a special place in my heart. It really does. I don't think it's my favorite, but, and maybe it's just because it's the first one that I seriously played. I have the memories with my close friend, but ultimately, it's Capcom's decision to make. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you're all subscribed, bell icon turned on. If you want to check out any of my other YouTube channels, our Discord, our TikTok, all the links are in the description below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.